Hi. Do you remember in school that favorite teacher that you had? The one that you really connected with, the one that you learned most effectively from. I think that you learn effectively because of the connection. I'm Rob Farley. Today we're going to talk about breaching the fourth wall, being able to make a connection to your audience to help them learn better when you're presenting. Big thanks to sponsors. Please thank them. Anyway, let's get into this. A good abstract is fantastic. It's what makes people turn up to listen to your session at a conference. A good abstract is going to be compelling. It's going to get people into the room. What I don't think it does, though, I don't think that it persuades them to stay in the room. Staying in the room, you need to have that connection. The abstract is like casting and fishing. It's like getting the hook into the water and being able to persuade the fish to somehow grab it. It's the lure. It's the thing that gets them there. The way that you keep them there and the way that you actually help them to learn something is through the connection. And that can often be a bit of a fight. You know, when you're dealing with the fish and the fish is on the hook, the fish wants to get away. And I put it to you that when you're standing in a conference room giving a presentation, or on camera as I am today, the people that are watching are really just trying to get away. The world is trying to distract them. They've got a phone in their hand that's got interesting information on it. They're looking to see how other people are reacting. They're even reading the slides on the wall, the information that you're putting up there. There's a lot of stuff to take away from that connection. And yet, I think they're in the room for you, the presenter. They're not there to be able to pick something up that they could have learnt just by finding a well-written blog or the documentation or even some video. They're there because you're there. They're there because they want to make a connection with you, because they want to learn from you, just like how you learned from that teacher in school. The thing is that when you're up there on stage, there is this barrier between you and the audience. It's not a physical barrier, it's just the edge of the stage, really. And it's there even if you've hopped off the stage and are walking around the audience. But that's actually why presenters get off the stage and walk around the audience, is because they want to be able to break through this fourth wall. We call it the fourth wall because of course behind me I've got a wall. You can see walls to the side. If I was in a physical room, you'd be able to see them possibly. But the fourth wall is the one that, as an audience member, you can't see. You can only see it if you've got an interesting shot in a movie where the camera moves around and sees the other wall. It's the wall that is being looked through. It's the edge of the stage. That's what it is. But it's a barrier. It sets you apart from those people that are in the audience. The people in the audience, the people in the audience all have something in common. They're all there watching you perform, watching you give a presentation. They are different to you. You're there on the stage and you're alone. There's a lot of people that have talked about the stage being a lonely place, but it really is. Everybody's looking at you. You're the one that they're criticizing. You're the one that they are expecting something from. There is no expectation on an audience member. I like to have expectations of my audience members. I like them to be involved. I like them to be tuned in. I like them to be telling me what they're thinking about various matters and so on. But at the end of the day, there's me and there's them. They're not me. I'm not them. I'm alone. They're not. There's lots of them. I want to be able to break through that fourth wall somehow. I want to be able to connect with them. I don't get to just go and sit with them and watch. But I want to somehow make the connection, that key connection that's going to help them learn. actors do this, right? Like very occasionally, you'll see some actor, like in the Deadpool movies, he'll stop and he'll turn to the camera. Actors are always told not to turn to the camera. They're told to pretend the camera's not there, to never look into the camera, to never be seen. But Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool, he looks into the camera and he makes comments. He makes a connection with the viewers that most movies don't. We see Miranda do it in her Miranda Hart in the TV show Miranda. We see Fleabag. Back when I was young, Frankie Howard used to do it. He'd always turn to the camera and make a ooh kind of a face, and somehow it was funny. Shakespeare does it. Shakespeare in Soliloquy. Hamlet gets up and he says, "To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them." The point here is that he's asking you to be more invested in what he's feeling. He's talking about suicide, right? It's just that he's presenting a side of himself that he can't present if he's just interacting with the other actors. When he's just going through the plot and all of that kind of stuff, you don't really see how he's feeling himself. You see a bit of it in some movies where somebody will have a confidant. But really, the only time that you see inside somebody is because they're trying to show you the connection. They're trying to show you what they're feeling. They're invested in that connection, and that's what they're there to show you in the soliloquy. You see, there's such a difference between the people in the audience and the people that are on the stage. I don't know if many of you know. I'm sure you do. Brené Brown, the famous TED Talk person, the researcher into things like shame and so on. She in her TED Talk and her presentation on Netflix on Daring Greatly in her book as well, she quotes Teddy Roosevelt. I've got it written here. It's the paper I've been holding. It says, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." There's a few things there, isn't there? There's a lot of stuff to kind of consume. He talks about the difference, between the people that are on the stage and the people that are just there watching, the critics, the ones who are willing to speak up and be, critical. He says that the glory doesn't belong to those people who are just there watching. That the credit, he says, belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, on the stage, the one who is putting himself up there, or herself. But Roosevelt's talking about the man in this situation, but person. They are there in the arena. They're suffering. They're being vulnerable. Brené Brown talks a lot about being vulnerable. And I really think that this is one of the keys to being able to make that connection. People that are afraid of connection don't tend to be very vulnerable, and likewise, people who are afraid of being vulnerable don't make good connections. The two are so linked. Making a connection does put you into a situation where you are going to know, some amount of pain. You're going to find that there's a bit of wind, sorry. You're going to find that there's that people will attack you. If somebody knows you, the more they know you, the more you risk. How did Roosevelt put it? Having your face marred by dust and sweat and blood. Doesn't necessarily sound appealing, but if you want to be that presenter, it's going to make the connection that people are going to be able to think of, then maybe it's worth striving for. Just maybe. When you're up giving a presentation, the key is not really just to teach. The key is to impart. And I put it to you that when you're giving a presentation at a conference, you don't just want to convey information. The idea is not that you just mark off your shopping list of the things that you want to achieve, but you actually want to be able to inspire people. You want to be able to have them leave somewhat changed. You want to be able to impart something to them that means that they change their behavior, that they change the way that they're doing things, that they write queries differently, that they use Azure Data Factory in a better way than they were, that you've introduced them to some tool that they can use. It's not just about teaching. There's that quote that says education is learning. It's not learning that the Holocaust involved the death of 6 million Jews, right? Education is not just about learning the facts, right? It's about understanding what happened and how it came about and how to avoid that and becoming determined to avoid that. Just learning a fact doesn't do it. You can learn the fact from a book. You can learn the fact from the documentation about something or from a blog post. A well-written blog post might inspire somebody, could impart something, sure. But understand that it's about the connection. That's how we do it. In a while, I'm going to run through like 6 fairly practical things that I think can help. But first of all, I want to talk about body parts, because what occurred to me is that a purely technical presentation is kind of aiming for the head, right? It's conveying information. It's appealing to your intellect. The idea is that you're showing things that can go into the head and remain there and become part of just knowledge that somebody knows. When you're wanting to be able to explain the options that are available when you create a new index, sure. You might even inspire somebody to use a different set of options, sure. But primarily, I think if you're really just explaining some purely technical thing, it's the head that you're aiming for, right? I do stand-up comedy from time to time, and I have to tell you that that most stand-up comics, they're trying to provoke a response, right? They're not aiming for the head at all. They tell a joke. They want you to respond, and they kind of aim for the gut. They want you to make, to have that reaction that becomes a laughter, right? Laughter can be quite tricky for a comedian to figure out how to get. I quite like the intellectual jokes as well, but I know that a room will laugh because they're, I don't know, slightly uncomfortable even, or something like that. And you see comedians will put a swear word in there just to provoke a response because they're going for the gut, right? I think that when you're up on stage giving a presentation and you're trying to impart something, when you're trying to persuade somebody to change their behavior, you don't want to aim just for the head or for the gut. You want to aim for the heart, right? The heart, the thing that, drives behavior, the thing that makes you feel something, the thing that it will keep you inspired to be able to behave a particular way. That's what you want to do when you're presenting. Don't just give the information. That's not going to invoke change in anything. Instead, aim for the heart. Aim for that body part that's going to actually, have a change. Let me talk about some of these 6 things that I want to describe to you today that I think are kind of practical things that you can take and think about as you're putting talks together and so on, and hopefully will provide you with a better chance of being able to have a presentation that connects. The first is narrative, right? Now let me explain. It's very different to storytelling. Okay? You might tell a story. You might tell a story and say, "Oh, look, I was traveling somewhere and I came across a person." So, all of this kind of stuff. You can tell a story. It might be vaguely related to your wider presentation, and that can be a useful point. You can make some great analogies and help drill concepts home and so on. But I don't think that really hits the connection so well as a narrative. And what I mean by a narrative is being able to have a story arc, being able to go from somewhere across to somewhere, and being able to let your audience know where you're at and where you're going, and be able to take them along with you, right? Understanding that it's a journey. If we think about the TV or film media perspective again, they all have a story. They're not just a list of facts, right? It's kind of the point of having a movie or having a TV show. Even if it's a documentary, there's a story. It goes from somewhere, it progresses through various things. There might be subplots, by all means. There might be tangents that people go on. But essentially, though, it's covering a narrative. That narrative is very important to being able to keep the audience tuned in, to be able to keep them connected to what's going on. A narrative, I think, is critical to being able to give a strong presentation and being able to keep your audience connected. If they tune out for a bit, they can come back and have an idea about where you're at. If you're just giving a list of things, or if your talk is disjointed in various ways, I think that becomes harder. They have to kind of know what the theme is, know roughly where you're traveling. In this presentation, I've given background about connections. I've talked about a few things, and now I'm covering 6 concepts. That can be useful. If I hadn't told you about the 6 concepts, well, you would have been able to tell that I was doing that, because at some point I would have started saying, and that's the first point, and things like that. It's not about explaining your structure ahead of time or anything like that. Sometimes that can actually take away from the connection, because there's no suspense. But nevertheless, there's still a storyline, an overarching storyline, that narrative arc. That's the first point, narrative. The second one's almost kind of a comedy thing, and that's about the idea of having an in-joke or a callback, right? Now, an in-joke, a joke that people will understand if they've got some sort of background information and so on, isn't necessarily fair on an audience. However, an in-joke is almost always funnier than a joke that is not an in-joke, a joke that everybody can get. This is just something about the secret. It means that those people that know the secret feel connected better. The callback is the thing where at the end of or during a comedy routine, you refer to some joke from earlier, and immediately it becomes slightly funnier. It's just people don't really know why it becomes funnier. It just does. Something inside us, something in the way that we respond to things as people. Turning away from the wind again, I hope. Something about how we're wired as people means that when we refer back to that thing from earlier, we like that. We think it's good. We're more likely to laugh, even if it's not particularly funny. But you can use that when you're presenting. If there's something that you showed earlier, you can hook back to it, and even if there's no funniness or anything like that, just the fact that you refer to something earlier in that story arc, that narrative, when you refer back to it, people go, aha, I recognize that. And it's the recognition that helps them make that part of the connection. It can be tricky to fold that into a presentation, but it's part of that. It's part of the connection. It encourages people to stay connected, and it's amazingly significant. And you'll find that just by building a couple of little callbacks in like that will really enhance how people respond. Maybe they won't be so critical of you. Remember, it's not them that counts; it's you that counts. But you want to make that connection, even though there's that separation. You want to be connected to them, right? I mean, Roosevelt talked about being in the arena, and of course, in the movie Gladiator, we see Russell Crowe with his, are you not entertained, and the secret that gets passed down to him. The key is to make them love you. It's not just about staying alive, that's kind of critical. Don't get me wrong. But the key to success in the arena for the gladiator was to be loved, was to be the one that they wanted to hang around, right? So, but by referring back to something earlier, it's just a quick reference that then means that that it's there. I'm sure you've all seen the movie Gladiator. If you haven't, I apologize. You might have missed the reference, but that reference, nevertheless, it's very useful. It's very it makes the fact that I referred to it makes it seem like you're special somehow because you know that reference. It's a strange thing. I'm not trying to take advantage of you here. I'm trying to point out the fact that referring to that other thing that someone knows makes it feel like an in-joke and helps them to understand it. The funny thing is, the more of an in-joke it is, the smaller the number of people that you'll be able to reach with it, but the stronger you'll be able to reach them with it. If I were to pick on some movie that none of you have seen, the ones who have seen it will be like, yes, I know that film, that sets me apart from the rest, and they'll like that because it's an in-joke. The rest of you might not feel that way. But you kind of have to, in some ways, work out whether your target audience is everyone or some people. To a certain degree, some people is okay. But obviously try and reach large numbers of people, but value the connection. If you have to sacrifice the connection with some people to make a strong connection with others, maybe that's a choice that you want to go for. But yeah, do think about the in-jokes. Self-deprecation is interesting. And it's the third of these points that I want to make. Remember, the first one was about the narrative. The second one was about the in-jokes or callbacks. This third one is about self-deprecation, the fact that you can't portray yourself as being better than they are, right? You want to be able to portray yourself as being in the same boat as them, having the same kind of difficulties as them, understanding that you're not it in a bit. And again, you can see this in comedy. The fact that there are times when a comedian will make fun of themselves. The fact that they'll be talking about the things where they are not so good. It helps people connect with them because they're one of them, right? It's that whole concept of thinking about that fourth wall, thinking about the fact that there is a separation, but that we're trying to break down that fourth wall. We're trying to point out the similarities between us, the presenter, and them, the audience member. Today, you, the audience member. I don't have all of this figured out. It's okay if I make a mistake. It's okay if I say something that doesn't quite work. It's okay if I turn my head and find that the breeze gets picked up on the mic. I hope it's not happening too much. I'll have to figure that out later and maybe come back and do this again. We'll see. But being self-deprecating is, I think, a significant part of breaking down the barriers between the stage and the audience. When If Deadpool had have just done the movie and won and all of that kind of stuff, I don't think he would have been as popular a movie character. Instead, I think he's very popular, and that's because you know that he feels kind of real. Of course, he's completely not real. He's a superhero whose body heals itself. I like that. I don't know why his face doesn't heal itself, but that's another matter. You can't come across as being the all-powerful presenter person on the stage. You want to be able to draw the similarities between you and the audience member by being self-deprecating. It's kind of important. The third one that I want to mention is passion, right? Passion is an interesting word. Passion, we understand passion, except that we don't, right? Passion, people think of passion as being they love this thing, they feel a passion towards it, they're passionate, they love it, they're emotional. But the word passion comes from the Latin passus, which is to suffer. They talk about the passion of the Christ being of the Easter passion because of talk about the suffering that Christ went through on the cross. It's not talking about the passion of the Christ because he fell in love with something. It's talking about the fact that he suffered. As a person on the stage, we are in a position to suffer. A person on the stage is, well, harking back again to Roosevelt's quote, is going to have a face marred by dust and sweat and tears. There's pain to be had on the stage, especially when evaluations come in. You know, it's all well and good to be able to say, you know what, it's not the critic that counts. But when evaluations land, and at the end of this, I'll show you, please do the evaluations. I want to know what you think, but I also don't want to know what you think because it hurts. It does. There's some amount of suffering to be had on the stage. But as well as that, there's some amount of suffering to be had for your content. The fact that you feel something about the thing that you're teaching is really significant to those people that are watching you. You have to be real, right? You have to point out that you're not just up there explaining the next module of some course. You're up there because you want people to be different. Because you can feel the pain that they have if they want to be able to achieve something. You can feel the joy of being able to implement something well. The fact that you feel this stuff, you let your passion be shown, is very significant to them feeling like they can connect with you. Passion is really very much a thing. You're not just speaking to the heart, you're speaking from the heart. You're speaking from the perspective of somebody who has known pain. Somebody who has tried to implement something and got caught out by some of the gotchas. By somebody who doesn't just jump in and understand it all innately, who had to go through the learning process themselves. You need to show your audience that you have suffered in this stuff and that you're willing to suffer again by being on the stage so that they can learn it. Being able to convey that It's very much something that breaks down that fourth wall and helps people connect and learn from you. The next one, this is the fifth one. Remember, we've been through the narrative, the in-joke / callbacks, the self-deprecation, and the passion. The fifth one's another body part, and that's eyes. It's not one that I mentioned earlier on, but eyes. They talk about eyes being the window of the soul. You've got to. Everybody's looking at you with their eyes. You need to look back at them into their eyes too. Even if you're on stage with a spotlight on you and you can't see the audience, or even if you're walking around on a beach talking into a camera, you need to be able to make eye contact with people. If I was just looking over here the whole time and so on, I'm talking, then you're not going to be quite as interested in what I've got to say as if I'm looking here at the camera. By maintaining eye contact with somebody, you let them know that you're interested. Even if you're not making actual eye contact with people, your audience can tell that you're making eye contact with people and will connect with that. Because they want to be the people that are seen as well, right? Remember in the Bruce Springsteen video, Dancing in the Dark, I think it is. He's, it's at a concert. He's dancing on stage, and then he sees Courtney Cox in the audience. It's before she's famous. She's not Monica from Friends yet. She hasn't even been in Ace Ventura. She's just this girl in the audience who's there for the experience of watching Bruce Springsteen. But he sees her. He sees her. He looks through the fourth wall. He looks beyond the stage. Everybody knows that he can see his other musicians and all that kind of stuff. But there comes that point where he sees through the fourth wall and sees Courtney Cox. He takes it one step further and gets her up on stage. But I don't think she was, that's not what people are necessarily hoping for. I mean, they might dream of that in a million years. But they really want to be seen by the presenter. They want the presenter to know they're there. They want the presenter to be doing that connection thing. And that connection is so much stronger if there's eye contact. If there's no eye contact, how do you even know if the presenter knows they're there? It's one of the difficulties with the spotlight. Sometimes if I'm doing comedy, and there's a spotlight on, sometimes, not all the time, just sometimes, I might ask them to turn the house lights up a bit so that I can see that there are people. Because if I can make that eye contact with them, I'll be able to figure out how they're responding as well, and I can actually speak to people. That's good. You see a lot of comedians just talk to the people in the front row, and that's because they're the ones they can see. That's all it is. I'm telling you, when you're on stage, there's a spotlight there. All you can see is a spotlight and maybe one or two people in the very front row. Or maybe just the empty chairs in the front row, if no one's game enough to go and sit there. If you're at a comedy show, go and sit in the front row, because if no one else is doing that, it makes it really even more lonely for the comics that are up there. So go and do that. Go and sit in the front. But let the presenter make eye contact with you. And if you're the presenter, make eye contact with the people that are there in the room. Because because they want you to. They might not appreciate the attention if you call them out on something, or if you ask them a question, if you ask them to participate in some way. They might be like, oh, hang on a second, what? But they want the connection. They want to be seen. They want to look at you and have you look at them and connect. Remember, you're speaking to the heart, so you aim for the eyes. The eyes are the thing that you look at. The eyes are the thing that you let them see of you. Don't ever present in sunglasses. If I'd worn sunglasses today, or transition lenses or whatever, and you couldn't see my eyes, it's not as good. It's just my eyes aren't particularly good anyway, but one of them droops a bit more than the other, all that kind of stuff. I'm not fond of my eyes. I need to wear glasses to make them work at all. But let them see your eyes and look into their eyes. Reject this advice that you get from people that say, don't make eye contact, it'll spook you. No, embrace the spook, right? Embrace the fact that you're going to have a connection and that it might change things for you. No. That's not a good place to be in. If you're giving a presentation and making eye contact with somebody in the audience puts you so much off your presentation that you can't carry on, or that you lose your spot, or whatever, then you didn't have a connection with the audience member. If you're going for the connection with your audience, then I think that you need to be embracing that, and not just having that connection through talking and so on, but by looking at them and making eye contact, and not just looking across the room at a point slightly above them or anything like that, or don't imagine them naked so that they feel somehow belittled or whatever. No, embrace the fact that you want the connection and look at their eyes and invite the connection. It makes a difference. It really does. If Shakespeare didn't want to have that, he wouldn't have put the soliloquy in there. The soliloquy is letting people see into what the actors are thinking. They need to be able to see into you. The way they do that is to make eye contact with you. Right? You're not just there giving a performance. You're there trying to impart knowledge. So look at their eyes. My last point, the last of the 6, is about PowerPoint. PowerPoint's a fascinating thing. We're asked to provide slides for conferences and so on. And I think PowerPoint is very, very useful. I think it's useful for being able to help prepare a talk. When you're planning what you're going to say, PowerPoint, the concept of bullet points and so on, and subpoints and, slide points. They can help you formulate your argument. But you know what? Anytime you're trying to persuade somebody of something, anytime you're trying to actually make a connection with somebody, anytime you're wanting to tell somebody something, there's never PowerPoint involved. I think, and here's my theory for this. If you've heard me talk about this at all before, you will have heard this, because I'm never afraid of telling people. PowerPoint, use it to prepare what the outline of your talk and so on. By all means, you can use it for the sake of figuring out timings, structure, and that kind of thing, because it is important that what you're saying has some amount of structure. I've been guilty of not doing that enough in the past, when I know where I'm going with things and so on, but But without that structure, some people have been like, well, hang on a second. And really that just conveys the fact that I didn't maintain the connection well enough while giving the presentation. If they feel that connection, it's much less likely that they'll say that they didn't feel like there was structure, because they'll see the structure that you have. Sorry, just accidentally bumped the camera there. They'll see the structure that you have through the connection. So PowerPoint can be useful for that. But I think when you have prepared your talk, then deliver your talk without PowerPoint. Deliver your talk with a whiteboard behind you, and write on the whiteboard. In fact, I think you'll just naturally write on the whiteboard those things that you're trying to convey. If you're in a meeting in a conference room, there's I don't mean a conference presentation room. I mean like a meeting room at an office, that kind of conference room. Table that's got space for 8 to 10 people around it or whatever, and there's probably a whiteboard there in the room. And if you're talking to those people to explain something that you didn't have time to prepare or whatever, there are some things that you will write on the whiteboard. You won't write everything on the whiteboard. You won't write paragraphs on the whiteboard. You might write, here's a point, here's a point, here's a point. You might draw a diagram on there. Every chance there that you will use your whiteboard to communicate, but that it won't be used in the way that PowerPoint is used. I think that you should use PowerPoint in your presentation the way that you would use a whiteboard. For me, with my 6 points, you can see that I've written them here for you, right? My 6 points, because I want to be able to keep harking back to them. The narrative, the in-jokes and callbacks, the self-deprecation, the passion, the eyes, the use of PowerPoint, the careful use of PowerPoint, potentially even the lack of the use of PowerPoint, the appropriate use of PowerPoint. I've written these on here for you so that you can see the structure that we've got, so that you can remember what they are, so that I can refer back to them without having to jog your memory too much. But if I had had 6 separate slides showing this, with a paragraph or 2 or 3 under sub-bullet points for each point, I think that would have taken away. Every time you put something there for somebody to see, they get distracted from you. The times that people have walked past me with their dogs, and there's some there too, right? Look, cute dog, great. So at that point, you're not listening to me anymore because there's something else for you to look at. There's always something else for somebody to be looking at. But if you put some words on the screen for somebody to read, they're reading those words. I haven't written many words on the screen here, and I hope that they haven't been overly distracting. I hope that you've been able to keep the focus on me. I mean, the format of saying, let's talk about this for an hour and so on, people do tune out. It's not like I produced a TV show with different scenes and all of that kind of stuff. It's not how presentations at conferences work. It's how TV shows work, and they're much better at keeping the interest level. Right? They can pan across to other things. They can change scenes. They can involve other people talking about other things, and have a way to be able to communicate the narrative effectively. I think try and use less PowerPoint. Create PowerPoint for notes for people to use afterwards, by all means. At which point, really, it's not so much PowerPoint as it's a Word document with, it's a blog post. It's got headings that refer to the major things, the things that you would have written in PowerPoint. But using PowerPoint as a presenting tool, I'm less of a fan. Use PowerPoint to display the things that you would have written on a whiteboard. Now, people disagree with me. They say, oh, yes, but for beginners. And I think, no, even for beginners, I think use PowerPoint effectively. If you're using PowerPoint as the crutch for your presentation, what's going on? It might be that you're needing those mini paragraphs to be there on the screen because maybe you can't remember the way that you're supposed to explain that thing, in which case, write them down somewhere so that you can, like how I read that quote earlier, I can't remember the quote. I just can't. I'm still thinking in my head that maybe I misquoted Shakespeare in the Hamlet speech. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler the mind, etc., etc., etc. Right? His suicide speech. Should I die and end all of this? But what happens if dying just means that I dream all my sorrows forever? You can write something down and that's fine. You can read it at the right times. So long as you're not taking away from the connection with the room. You're better off making sure that you know your stuff ever so well so that you can try and explain it naturally. So that you can explain it without having the notes. People will understand that you're trying to find the best way of explaining something and so on, but they will also understand that they're seeing you. You can say to somebody, I'm going to read this. They're not going to feel any worse. Don't read your whole presentation. Just read the quotes stuff. Don't put things in place so that they are distracted away from you. PowerPoint removes that connection, and I'm much less of a fan. Hey, look, we're coming up to time. It's I reckon we're about 53 minutes in. I can see it on the screen that I'm recording this on. It says 53 and 15 seconds. I want to leave you today with the 3 things. 3 points, all right? I know I just went through my 6 practical things that you can do to maintain that connection. But the 3 things that I really want you to take away from today. The first one, connect, right? Connect with your audience. Don't be satisfied with the idea of simply getting up and doing your presentation by yourself and hoping that they take something from it. Actually seek to make the connection with them. If you make that connection, you're much more likely to be able to teach them something that they remember, that they learn, that they implement. Otherwise, you just become some resource that they'll wish they had written down instead of on a video. Or something where they have to have taken all the notes to make sure it's okay. If you've got people making crazy notes while you're talking, are they distracted from listening to you? Sometimes people help themselves by writing the notes, and it's fine. But do be conscious of if you're giving too much information, they will be, and they're scribbling stuff down, they're focusing on getting that onto the paper, not on you anymore. So seek to connect, right? My second one is I'm going to have a picture of an eye. See them and be seen. Let them see you. Let them see into you. Let them see the stuff that you're feeling. Let them see that you're real. Let them see your passion, your suffering. Let them see your soul, right? Let them look into your eyes and look back at their eyes, because the eyes are really significant to maintain that connection. Be seen and see them. And the last one is aim for the heart. Don't aim for the head. Don't just be there saying, I'm gonna give you a presentation. It's gonna be about this topic, and be just purely technical the whole time. That's not what they're there for. They are there to learn from you. They are there for the connection. They are there because they want to get your heart. They want you to aim for their heart. They want you to reach them. They want to be involved somehow. They want their heart to be in play. So yeah, connect with them, see them and be seen by them. Aim for the heart. My hope for you is that you'll be able to lift your presentation game. You'll be able to connect with your audiences, that you'll be able to break down that fourth wall and just step up into another level of presenting.